You're sitting in a room full of people. The Christmas lights cast their warm glow across familiar faces. Laughter echoes. Someone pours another drink. The tree stands decorated in the corner, its branches heavy with ornaments that hold years of memories. And yet you feel completely alone. Not the alone you feel when you're by yourself on a quiet evening. That kind of solitude can be peaceful, even restorative. No, this is different. This is the loneliness that creeps in precisely when you're supposed to feel most connected. When you're surrounded by family, friends, partners. When every social script tells you this should be the warmest, most fulfilling time of year. The decorations are up, the rituals are performed. You've said all the right things, smiled at all the right moments, but underneath it all, there's an emptiness you can't name, a distance you can't bridge, a hunger that the feast doesn't satisfy. If you've ever felt this way, especially during the holidays, especially at Christmas, you're not broken, you're not ungrateful, and you're certainly not alone in your aloneness. What you're experiencing is something the pioneering psychologist Carl Jung spent his lifetime trying to help us understand. The profound disconnection that happens when we confuse desire with love, when we mistake our persona for our true self, when we project our inner longings onto others, and then wonder why we still feel empty when they're standing right beside us. This Christmas loneliness isn't about being single or coupled, about having a large family or a small one. It's not even really about Christmas. It's about something far deeper, a fundamental split within ourselves that the holiday season, with all its demands for joy and togetherness, throws into sharp relief. Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've pushed away, denied, refused to acknowledge, and Christmas, with its bright lights and forced cheer, casts the longest shadows of all. Here's what Jung understood that most of us spend our lives avoiding. You cannot truly connect with another person until you've connected with yourself. You cannot experience real love until you've stopped confusing it with desire. And you cannot feel at home with others until you've made peace with the stranger living inside your own skin. Over the next several minutes, we're going to explore why you feel this loneliness, what Carl Jung's depth psychology reveals about love, desire, and emotional disconnection, and most importantly, what you can do about it. Not quick fixes, not surface solutions, but the kind of deep, transformative understanding that might actually change how you experience not just this Christmas, but every relationship, every moment of supposed connection for the rest of your life. Because here's the truth Jung discovered. Your loneliness is trying to tell you something. It's not your enemy, it's a messenger. And if you can learn its language, it will lead you towards something you've been searching for all along, not in others, not in the perfect holiday moment, but in the depths of your own being. Jung discovered something that changes everything once you see it. We all wear masks. He called this mask the persona, the social face we present to the world, the version of ourselves we've carefully constructed to be acceptable, lovable, successful. And nowhere is this persona more demanded, more rigidly enforced than during the Christmas season. Think about it. From the moment December arrives, there's a script. You're supposed to be joyful, grateful, full of holiday spirit. You're supposed to love gathering with family, cherish old traditions, feel warmth and connection. The cultural message is relentless. This is the most wonderful time of the year. And if you're not feeling it, if you're feeling disconnected, lonely, or emotionally numb, then clearly something is wrong with you. So you put on the mask. You smile wider. You participate in the rituals. You buy the gifts, attend the parties, post the photos. You perform the role of someone who is happy, connected, fulfilled. And with each performance, the real you, the one feeling that gnawing emptiness gets pushed further into the shadow. Here's where Jung's insight becomes crucial. Whatever we push into the shadow doesn't disappear. It grows stronger. It becomes more desperate. And it will find ways to make itself known. This is why you might find yourself snapping at your partner over something trivial on Christmas morning. Why you might drink more than usual at family gatherings. Why you might feel an inexplicable urge to escape, to be anywhere but here, despite having everything you're supposed to want. The shadow contains all the parts of ourselves we've deemed unacceptable. During Christmas, that often includes the part of you that doesn't want to see certain family members, the part that finds the holiday traditions exhausting rather than meaningful, the part that feels resentful about the emotional labor, the financial strain, the pressure to perform joy, the part that would rather be alone with a book than at another crowded gathering, the part that feels grief during a season that demands only gratitude. But here's what's even more important. The shadow also contains your deepest longings, your truest desires, your authentic self. When you feel lonely at Christmas despite being surrounded by people, it's often because none of those people are seeing the real you because you're not showing them. You can't. You're too busy maintaining the persona, playing the role, meeting the expectations. Jung understood that this creates a devastating paradox. The more you try to connect with others through your persona, the more disconnected you actually become, because personas can only interact with other personas. Masks talk to masks. The real connection, the soul-deep recognition, the genuine intimacy only happens when we dare to let the masks slip, when we allow our shadow to emerge into the light. And this is where it intersects with love and desire in ways that most of us have never understood. Because when we're living primarily through our persona, we don't actually love others, we need them. We need them to validate our mask, to confirm that our performance is working, to fill the void created by our self-abandonment. We need them to be what we're not allowing ourselves to be. We need them to carry the parts of us we've rejected. This isn't love. This is projection. And it's exhausting for everyone involved. Real love, Jung suggested, requires what he called individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating the shadow, of moving beyond the persona to discover your authentic self. But our culture, especially during the holidays, pushes us in the opposite direction. Conform, perform, pretend, keep the peace, don't make waves, be grateful for what you have, don't acknowledge the darkness. And so we sit in rooms full of people, performing connection, all while feeling desperately, achingly alone. Because the person everyone is interacting with isn't really you. It's a carefully curated version designed to meet expectations, avoid conflict, and maintain the illusion that everything is fine. The loneliness you feel at Christmas isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's your psyche's way of telling you that you've strayed too far from yourself, that the distance between your persona and your true self has become unbearable, that your soul is starving for authenticity in a season that demands only performance. And until you understand the difference between desire and love, you'll keep trying to fill this void with more of what doesn't work. Now we reach the heart of Jung's teaching on why our relationships, especially our most intimate ones, so often leave us feeling empty, even when they seem full. It comes down to understanding the difference between desire and love, and how something Jung called the Anima and Animus shapes everything we think we want in another person. Jung observed that each of us carries within our unconscious an inner image of the opposite sex. For men, this is the Anima, the feminine dimension of the male psyche. For women, this is the Animus, the masculine dimension of the female psyche. These aren't just abstract concepts. They're powerful, autonomous forces within us that shape who we're attracted to, what we desire, and critically, how we project our own unintegrated qualities onto others. Here's how this plays out in real life. You meet someone. There's a spark, a recognition. Something about them feels like it completes you, fills a space you didn't even know was empty. You desire them intensely, not just physically, but emotionally, psychically. Being with them feels like coming home, like finding the missing piece. This, our culture tells us, is love. This is the one. But Jung would say, wait, what you're experiencing right now is primarily projection. You're seeing your own anima or animus reflected in this other person. You're falling in love with parts of yourself that you've never owned, never integrated, never brought into consciousness. The intensity you feel isn't really about them, it's about your own disowned wholeness finally being glimpsed in external form. This is desire, not love. And the distinction is everything. Desire says, I need you to be this for me. I need you to carry these qualities I cannot own in myself. I need you to make me feel whole, complete, alive. Desire is about lack, about hunger, about using another person to fill an internal void. It's not that desire is bad, it's simply not enough. It's not sustainable, because the moment the other person fails to match your projection, the moment they reveal themselves to be a complex, flawed, separate human being rather than the carrier of your disowned self, desire curdles into disappointment, into resentment, into loneliness. This is why you can be in a relationship, even a marriage, and still feel profoundly alone. Because you're not actually relating to the person in front of you. You're relating to your projection, to who you need them to be. And they're doing the same to you. Two people, each desperately trying to get the other to carry parts of themselves they won't acknowledge. It's a recipe for disconnection masquerading as intimacy. Love, in Jung's framework, is something entirely different. Love emerges not from lack, but from wholeness. It happens when you've done the work of integrating your anima or animus, when you've owned the qualities you use to project onto others, when you've become comfortable with your own completeness. Only then can you see another person clearly, as they actually are, rather than as a screen for your unconscious contents. Love says, I see you as you are, separate from me, whole in yourself. I don't need you to complete me because I'm working on becoming complete within myself. I can appreciate you without consuming you. I can desire you without demanding that you fix what's broken in me. This is why Jung insisted that the work of individuation of becoming whole is the necessary foundation for genuine love. You cannot truly love another person while you're using them to avoid loving yourself. You cannot have authentic intimacy while hiding behind a persona, projecting your shadow, and demanding that others carry what you won't acknowledge. During Christmas, this dynamic intensifies. We project so much onto the holiday itself, onto family, onto partners, onto the idea of home and togetherness. We expect it all to make us feel complete, to fill the void, to provide the connection we're starving for. And when it doesn't, when we're still lonely despite all the trappings of togetherness, we blame the holiday, or our family, or our partner, or ourselves for not being grateful enough. But the real issue is that we're asking external circumstances to do internal work. We're demanding that others provide what only we can give ourselves. Integration, wholeness, the courage to face our shadow and embrace our authentic being. Until you understand this distinction, until you can recognize when you're operating from desire versus love, from projection versus genuine seeing, you'll keep feeling lonely no matter who's sitting beside you. Because the person you're actually longing for isn't them, it's you. The whole, integrated, authentic you that you've been avoiding all along. If this is resonating with you, if you're recognizing these patterns in your own life, drop a comment below. Sometimes just naming what we're experiencing begins the process of transformation. And stay with me, because what comes next is how we actually begin to change this. Here's the cruel paradox at the center of our loneliness. The very mechanism we use to protect ourselves from pain is the same mechanism that creates our isolation. Jung called this the persona, and understanding how it operates is essential to understanding why you feel disconnected even when you're physically surrounded by connection. The persona develops early. As children, we quickly learn which parts of ourselves are acceptable to our family, our culture, our community, and which parts need to be hidden away. Are you too emotional? Too quiet? Too loud? Too sensitive? Too intense? The message comes through loud and clear. Be less of that. Be more of this. Shape yourself into something we can accept. And so you do. You learn to perform, to edit, to present a curated version of yourself that earns approval, avoids punishment, maintains belonging. This isn't conscious manipulation, it's survival. The persona is a necessary adaptation, especially in childhood when we're truly dependent on others for our physical and emotional survival. But here's what happens. Over time, the persona becomes a prison. What started as a protective mechanism becomes a barrier to genuine connection. You get so good at performing the acceptable version of yourself that you lose touch with who you actually are underneath. The mask becomes so familiar that you forget you're wearing it. This is especially true during the holidays. Christmas comes with enormous pressure to perform specific emotional states: joy, gratitude, family harmony, generous spirit. There's no room for ambivalence, for grief, for resentment, for the complicated truth of how you actually feel about gathering with people who may have hurt you, who may not really know you, who may be performing just as hard as you are. So you smile, you participate, you say the right things, you post the photos that suggest everything is perfect. And with each performance, the gap between your persona and your authentic self grows wider. This gap is what Jung identified as the source of neurosis, the psychic suffering that comes from self-alienation, from living a life that looks right from the outside while feeling hollow on the inside. Now, here's the insidious part. The persona feels safe. Dropping it feels dangerous. Because what if people don't like who you really are? What if they reject your shadow, your authenticity, your truth? What if speaking honestly about your loneliness, your grief, your complicated feelings about the holidays, what if that breaks the illusion and you lose the connection you do have, even if it's superficial? This is the trade-off we make. Safety over authenticity, approval over intimacy, belonging to a group over being true to ourselves. And it's a trade-off that guarantees loneliness. Because while the persona might earn you a seat at the table, it will never earn you the deep soul-level connection you're actually craving. Jung understood that emotional disconnection isn't a bug in the system, it's the system working as designed. When you prioritize maintaining your persona over expressing your authentic self, disconnection is the inevitable result. You cannot be seen if you're not showing yourself. You cannot be known if you're not revealing the truth. You cannot be loved for who you are if who you are is hidden behind layers of performance and protection. This is why therapy, why Jung's work, why the process of individuation matters so much. Because it's not about fixing what's wrong with you. It's about recognizing that the mechanism you thought was keeping you safe is actually keeping you lonely. It's about understanding that the risk of authenticity, of letting the persona slip, of integrating the shadow, of showing up as your whole, imperfect, complicated self is actually less dangerous than the slow death of living as someone you're not. During Christmas, you have a choice. You can continue performing the holiday script, maintaining the persona, pretending everything is fine while feeling increasingly empty inside. Or you can begin gently, carefully, to let some truth slip through, to acknowledge the loneliness, to speak about the complexity of your feelings, to risk showing someone the parts of yourself you usually hide. It won't be comfortable. The persona exists for a reason. It protects us from vulnerability, from judgment, from potential rejection, but it also protects us from life, from love, from the kind of authentic connection that actually nourishes the soul. And at some point, you have to decide, is the safety worth the loneliness? So we've explored the problem, the shadow, the projection, the persona, the gap between desire and love. Now comes the crucial question, what do we do about it? How do we move from this place of disconnection and loneliness towards something more real, more whole, more alive? Jung's answer is both simple and profoundly challenging. Individuation. The process of becoming who you actually are, of integrating the shadow, of withdrawing your projections, of moving beyond the persona to discover and embody your authentic self. This isn't a weekend workshop. It's not a quick fix. It's the work of a lifetime. But it's also the only work that actually matters. Here's how Jung said it works and how it applies specifically to your loneliness and disconnection. First, recognize the shadow. You cannot integrate what you don't acknowledge. Begin by paying attention to what triggers you and others. The qualities you find most irritating, most unacceptable, most judgeable, these are often your own shadow contents that you've refused to own. That uncle who's too loud and opinionated, that sister who's too needy and emotional, That partner who's too withdrawn and cold? Look carefully at what you're reacting to because it's probably showing you something about yourself that you've pushed away. During this Christmas, instead of simply reacting to difficult family members, get curious. What does their behavior reveal about parts of yourself you've disowned? This doesn't mean their behavior is okay or that boundaries aren't important. It means using their challenging qualities as a mirror to understand your own psyche more deeply. Second, withdraw your projections. This is harder than it sounds. Start noticing when you're expecting others to be or do something that would make you feel complete. When you're angry that your partner doesn't intuit your needs, ask yourself, am I expecting them to carry something I should be giving myself? When you're disappointed that family gatherings don't provide the warmth and connection you crave, ask, am I projecting an idealized image of what family should be rather than accepting what it actually is? The goal isn't to lower your standards or accept poor treatment. The goal is to stop outsourcing your wholeness to other people. To stop believing that the right person, the right family dynamic, the right Christmas will finally make you feel complete. Because that's desire talking, not love. That's projection, not reality. Third, cultivate a relationship with yourself. This sounds self-help why, but Jung meant something specific. He meant, turn your attention inward with the same curiosity, compassion, and commitment you've been directing outward. Spend time alone not as something to be avoided or filled with distraction, but as an opportunity to meet yourself. Journal, reflect, sit with uncomfortable feelings without immediately trying to fix them or make them go away. Ask yourself the questions you've been avoiding. Who am I when I'm not performing? What do I actually feel underneath the persona? What am I afraid would happen if I showed my real self? What parts of me have I been rejecting or suppressing? What does my loneliness want me to understand? Fourth, practice radical authenticity in small doses. You don't have to blow up Christmas dinner with brutal honesty, but you can begin experimenting with letting the mask slip a little. When someone asks how you are, try giving a real answer instead of fine. When you're feeling overwhelmed by holiday expectations, try saying so instead of pushing through. When you disagree with someone, try expressing it instead of performing agreement. Start small, test the waters, see what happens when you show a little more of your truth. Often you'll find that the catastrophe you feared doesn't happen. Instead, something else occurs. Other people relax. The conversation becomes more real. Permission gets granted for everyone to be a little more human, a little less perfect. Fifth, seek out and offer genuine seeing. This is what love actually is in Jung's framework. Not projection, not need, not using others to complete yourself, but the practice of truly seeing another person as they are and allowing yourself to be seen. This requires that you've done enough shadow work to stop projecting your unconscious contents onto everyone around you. It requires that you've moved beyond the persona enough to show something real. During Christmas, this might mean really listening when someone talks instead of waiting for your turn to speak, asking genuine questions instead of making small talk, offering presence instead of performance, acknowledging the complexity of others instead of reducing them to their role in your family system. And crucially, it means allowing others to see you. Not the curated version, not the persona, but the person who sometimes feels lonely at gatherings, who has complicated feelings about family, who doesn't always find the holidays magical, who is doing their best to become whole in a world that often rewards fragmentation. Here's what Jung's work ultimately teaches us about Christmas loneliness, about love and desire, about disconnection and belonging. Your loneliness is not the problem. Your loneliness is the beginning of the solution. That empty feeling you get when you're surrounded by people at holiday gatherings, it's not evidence that something is wrong with you or your family or your relationships. It's evidence that you've drifted away from yourself. That the gap between your persona and your authentic self has become too wide to ignore. That your psyche is calling you home not to some external ideal of connection, but to the internal work of integration. The loneliness won't be solved by finding the right person, having the perfect Christmas, or finally getting your family to be what you wish they were. Those are desire solutions, attempts to use external circumstances to fill an internal void. They might provide temporary relief, but they won't touch the deeper hunger. The real resolution comes from a different direction entirely. It comes from doing the hard, unglamorous work of befriending your shadow, of withdrawing your projections, of building a genuine relationship with yourself that isn't based on performance or perfection, of learning to distinguish between the loneliness that comes from isolation and the solitude that comes from self-knowledge. Jung called this individuation, but you might call it becoming real, becoming whole, becoming the person you've been hiding underneath the masks and roles and expectations. And here's the paradox. When you do this work, when you stop abandoning yourself to maintain the persona, when you integrate your shadow and withdraw your projections, you become more capable of genuine connection, not less. Because love, real love, not desire masquerading as love, requires two whole people. It requires that you're not using the other person to complete yourself because you're working on becoming complete within yourself. It requires that you can see them clearly instead of through the lens of projection. It requires that you can show up authentically instead of performing connection while feeling empty inside. This Christmas, wherever you are, whoever you're with, you have an opportunity. Not to fix your loneliness immediately, not to transform all your relationships overnight, but to begin. To notice when you're performing versus when you're present. To catch yourself projecting. To feel your shadow instead of pushing it away. To risk showing a little more of your truth. And to understand that the loneliness you feel isn't your enemy. It's your call to awakening. It's your psyche's way of saying, come home to yourself. Stop abandoning who you are to maintain relationships that don't feed your soul. Stop confusing desire with love, projection with seeing, persona with authentic self. The journey from loneliness to genuine connection doesn't go through finding the right external circumstances. It goes through the interior landscape of your own being, through the shadow, through the persona, through all the parts of yourself you've been avoiding or denying or projecting onto others. It's not an easy path. Jung never promised it would be, but it's the only path that leads to what you're actually seeking. Not to be less lonely in a crowd, but to be whole in yourself. Not to be desired, but to be capable of love. Not to perform connection, but to experience it. This is Jung's gift to us. The understanding that our loneliness isn't something to be medicated away or distracted from or solved with better relationships. It's an invitation, a doorway, a call from the depths of our being to begin the most important journey we'll ever take the journey toward ourselves.